Hello, everybody. We are waiting for the last few people to come in to the gallery. I'm going to give you a nice view of part of the gallery just while we're waiting. So we've got a few more people to come to the live viewing, and looking forward to sharing everything with you guys.
Brilliant. Okay, so you on the floor. There he is. Dominic's come. There we are. Brilliant. You're very welcome. Enjoy. All right. Oh, yeah, no,
Right.
How many people have you got attending it tonight then here, as in
Supposed to be
physical people?
15 supposedly. But like you said, two aren't.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we've only got a few minutes. Well, actually, it's just gone 7, so I think I'm going to kick off and just do intros and things like that, and great stuff. So let's turn this around. Cracking. Great. Welcome everyone. I think it has just gone 7, and I am aware that we've got viewers online waiting as well, and so I don't want to hold anything up for too long. So we probably will have people come through, but it is what it is, and that's absolutely fine. And the dog may wander across every so often, but you've all met Poppy, I imagine now, so she'll just do what she does. She'll probably find something and lie down somewhere. So to kind of introduce things, I'm just going to start by for our live viewers here, thank you very much for turning up. Really appreciate it. The toilets, if you need them, if you aren't aware yet, you have to go over to the Brewhouse Arts Centre. They're in there, and if there is any kind of fire at all, I cannot imagine a fire breaking out when it's this cold, but the emergency exits are around. There is actually an exit there, over there, and it's a thumb turn, so that is probably the nearest exit. So just make your way out to the car park if anything happens. And yeah, so that's for our live viewers. You guys online know what you're doing. I assume you're somewhere where you know where the toilets are, so I'm not going to worry about that. So by way of introduction, I'm never going to be able to kind of like speak to people. There's loads of chat going on the YouTube there. So I'm not even going to try seeing that until we get to the questions later on. So to give you an overview of the evening, I'm going to give you a quick introduction. I'm going to talk about, for our viewers online, I'm going to talk a little bit about the gallery. A lot of you know, obviously, already about what we've got here. I'm going to, hello Poppy. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm going to give you my story so you can kind of see where I've come from and what I've kind of built my business up to be so far. And I'm going to hopefully impart some little bits of knowledge and nuggets of information about what I've picked up along the way. That's my whole point of this evening, is to really share with you my experiences and hope that will help you guys in the future. So I've got a few technical things I want to do first. I'm just going to press record on this. Let me see video. Let's get that going. Okay, so I'm recording the whole thing. I'm going to make, for everybody who's bought a ticket and hasn't managed to either watch the live stream or be here tonight, I'm going to make it available on YouTube for a week afterwards. If someone hasn't managed to see it by then, they can get in touch with me and actually ask me, and I'll personally send them the link, and we'll just make sure everybody who's paid for the ticket gets to see the actual talk. So let's first of all, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the gallery. So what we've got here, we are sitting in a gallery that is, it's a massive space. We were given an empty building by Taunton Council, and it's absolutely amazing opportunity. We've been able to promote local artists. We've had local artists actually doing live artwork in here and manning the place. And we've just been able to bring something to an empty high street shop that is something nobody has seen before in this kind of setting. Just the amount of big pieces here, sculptures are just incredible quality, and it's amazing to just bring this to the public eye. And we've had amazing feedback and made some great sales so far. So that's a little intro to the gallery. So I'm just going to say hi to all the international guys on here. I know we've got Felix from Belgium, and we've got a few other guys on here. I'm not going to read everyone out, but it's great to see you all. So we've got a lot of international people, Germany, we've got the States, we've got Scotland. So it's great to see you all, and thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. So I am just going to very quickly run through this. So this gives, this is my background really. This is where I've come from. So I started out as an illustrator. My degree was in children's book illustration. So that was my background. It was what I always wanted to do. But coming out of university, it's incredibly difficult to find a job as an illustrator. I don't know how many of you have been told art isn't a proper job, and you need to get yourself a real job, all of that kind of thing. We all hear it, and it's so difficult to just kind of turn up and go, no, I believe I can do this. It's something that I always aspired to do, but never thought I'd get the opportunity to do it. So my illustration really took a back burner when I left university, and I took a slight change in direction. I became a tree surgeon. So it was enjoyable for me at the time. I really enjoyed the outdoor work, and the guy I was doing tree surgery for was really quite encouraging. So when I first saw somebody using the chainsaw to carve, he said, "Oh, yeah, by all means, give it a go. If you're any good, we'll hire you out to my customers." So I kind of got into chainsaw carving in that way, and it became a passion. And I started to really work at it, and I got sales. I got people contacting me and wanting my work. but I was doing everything through the tree surgeon. So it was almost like he was an agent for me in a way, and it was an easy sell in some ways, because we would go to somebody's house and take a tree down, and we'd say, "Oh, hang on, you don't want to take it all the way down. You want a little howl in there." So it was a really good way of utilising what was coming off of the actual job and the industry. And I'm aware that over time, I got to the point where I was getting good enough that I thought to myself, maybe I can run this as a business. So a few people talked to me and said, why are you still working for Nick? Why don't you do this for yourself? And at the time, I was convinced that I would never be able to run a business. I wasn't academically minded. I wasn't great at maths. I really had no idea what a business was and how to run one. I really struggled to get my head around how can you, how do I run a business? I've got no idea where to start. Somebody very kindly suggested to me that I go to Wrexham Council, where I was at the time, and go and ask, is there any business courses? And there was a free business course running at the time, and a lot of councils do this. They actually do run startup business courses. They're quite easy to find. I haven't looked for a while. I don't know what it's like in this area. I don't know what it's like where you guys are online, but it is worth seeking out. And there's usually a lot of freely available help online for starting up a business. Now, I've immediately launched into talking about business, and I know as an artist, I hate the word business because it sounds so clinical. It sounds so contained and straight lines, and none of us like straight lines, do we? I don't know any artist apart from, maybe Mondrian. We're talking creative beings here. We're talking creative souls who want to express themselves through their artwork. So to turn around and go, oh, you need to run it as a business, it's a really scary thing to hear, and it is a put-off. It's a real put-off. So what I want to do this evening is kind of break down how I see business in relation to art. So what I've done is I have a lot of writing on here, but I'm gonna read this out to you, because this was a statement I wrote when I first kind of started thinking about how do we look at business as artists, and how do we look at work and the world of marketing the way the buyers are seeing it. Because the buyers aren't necessarily coming to you and seeing, they're seeing this amazing creative soul, but they're coming to you expecting what they've got in their heads. When they buy something, they expect retail. And the way to try and sort of explain that to people and say that it's not such a scary thing is kind of this. So I've called it sketching out a business. We all kind of plan our artwork. We all get to a point where we have something in our hearts that we want to express to people. And we start with a sketch. So sketching is a way to plan out a drawing, painting, sculpture, or any kind of creation. It's a blueprint, it's a roadmap, or whatever other analogies. Let's try that word again, that you can think of. So from early cave paintings to digital age of illustration, the art of observing real life and recreating it on a surface using lines has been a way for mankind to express emotion and appreciation for the natural world. When we draw, we take visual information that we've gained through observation and we transfer those images onto a surface using marks. I believe that the level of observation and understanding of what is observed has the greatest impact on the quality of what is drawn. So children are a great example of this. They look at a subject and will observe and retain a certain level of information. When they draw that subject, it's the big and obvious details that they remember. So, for instance, a horse has 4 legs, eyes, a long face, a mane, and a tail. To a child, it doesn't matter that one of the legs is longer than one of the others. It doesn't matter that both eyes are visible, even though the drawing's from one side. Peppa Pig's a great example of that. And to a child, the details in between the main elements, the proportions, the viewpoint, don't hold the same level of importance as the simple fact that everything that makes it a horse to that child is present. So they learn how to lay down a sketch onto paper, or to learn how to lay down a sketch onto paper to help us create an image. We need to know what we're looking at and how to take that information in order to transfer it to people. So the long and short of that is that is the way that I want to relate art to business. And I'm not going to apologize for using the word business, because the world uses the word business. And we have to, as artists, be able to impress ourselves in the world and not conform to it. But to impress ourselves into the world, we need to be able to convey what we're trying to. We need to have the correct translation for people who don't necessarily see art the way we do. So when I first started my business, I needed help. So I went on a basic course, as I mentioned before, and understood how to implement around 30% of what I learned. I picked that figure out of the air. It's a smallish amount. Didn't really fully know how to run a business after doing a basic course. I knew the importance of planning, but I didn't know where to start. I knew I had to manage money in some way, but hadn't a clue how to. And I knew I had to get customers, but knew nothing about marketing. So if we go back to our analogy of a child drawing a horse, this was at the stage I was with managing my artwork as a business. I knew the big details. I knew planning came into it somewhere. I knew I had to deliver a piece of artwork. I knew I had to market that artwork, show it to the world. Who do I show it to? I knew I had to deal with money. That's the bit I hate. Absolutely hate that bit. I knew I had to deal with customers as well, and another thing that introverts aren't great at. And this is what I knew at the time. So these big details, all very important, but I think we need to step back and know how to connect them. So here we go. So my general idea was good, but my planning was bad. I spent too much time on the bits I knew I could do, and my time and money management were absolutely awful. I was really bad at asking for help. And this happens an awful lot with artists. We know how to do the good bit. We know how to do the bit that people go, wow, that's amazing. But it's one of those things where you really, it's painfully obvious sometimes. And I've been there myself. I want to kind of do a little bit of a disclaimer at this point. I am not perfect at this. This management of time, management of money, sometimes management of customers isn't my strong point, but I'm going to get on to how I got over those little pitfalls the further on we get into the talk. So this last little line is the key, really, to what I was what's the word? What we need to do, what we need to aspire to. So I had a design for a business. I had the subject matter. So when you look at your art, that is your subject matter. So if you're laying out this sketch, this blueprint for an art business, hi guys, just sit down anyway, go for it. No worries at all. Good to see you. So my whole idea of sketching out a business, I had the design in my head. I knew what the outcome was. I knew what the end goal was, but it was just getting there. So I start off when I'm doing a sketch with the subject matter. If we start with a blank canvas, it's incredibly difficult to start, isn't it? Just to know what to do. So you have to have some kind of subject matter. Try and say that with my teeth in. Subject matter in your head. You need to know what you are selling. So in relation to a business, you need to know what you're selling, and you need to know who wants to buy it. So those two things are one of the key things. So what you're selling is yourself, essentially. You're selling your artwork. You're selling what you're trying to convey to people through the medium of creativity. So let's move on. The next thing I would look at when I'm doing a sketch is composition. So I've got my subject matter. In relation to my art business, I know what I want to sell. My composition is, how do I lay it out? How does that look in relation to some kind of plan? What's it going to look like, and how does it fit on the page? Now, how does it fit on the page is quite an interesting analogy for business, because we know how to compose something. We know if we're taking a photograph, we know that the rule of thirds, the golden ratio, all of that kind of information is kind of ingrained in us, and we know what looks good on a page. But when we start to relate it to business, how does it fit on the pages? How do you fit into the world? Where does your artwork, where does what you're selling fit? If I was doing, erotic art, I'm not going to try and sell it to the WI at their, weekend fair, am I? It's probably not going to go down very well. Or if it does, then you might need to be worried. But the whole thing is, where do you fit in that world? And you need to know who is going to want to buy what you're creating. So the next thing I look at, once I know my subject matter, once I know my composition, where are things going to fit? Proportions. So I've used the analogy of proportions to look at how much I focus on one thing more than another. What should I not do? Can I use reference? I've had a number of people talk to me over the years and say, isn't it cheating to look at pictures? Shouldn't it be in your head? And when you're doing a painting or when you're doing a drawing, the only way you're going to get good is by actually observing what you want to paint. You're observing that subject matter. And whether you observe a photograph of something or whether you observe other people's art to get inspiration, reference, I think, it's very easy to confuse it, unless you know what you're talking about, with copying or plagiarism and things like that. But reference is actually how we're always finding reference, whether we know it or not, because we're taking in visual information. So when we relate reference to a business, you look at the successful people. So I don't know, pick one out the air, whether you like him or not. Damien Hirst is he's an artist. I'm not here to kind of say something is good or something is bad. It is completely subjective. But you're looking at an artist who has a good sense of business. So he knows the market. He knows exactly who he's aiming things at, and he has buyers. I'm not going to go into using art as tax relief and all that kind of thing. I know that kind of thing happens, but so in that sense, it's probably a good idea to find reference in somebody that is doing something in a similar way to how you would like to do it. So for me, for instance, as a sculptor, I'm looking at other sculptors who I see as successful. I'm seeing they've They might have a large following on social media, although that isn't a sign of good sales, just to put that out there. But you might see that they've been successful selling things in a gallery, and you think, oh, actually, that's the market that I want. I'm going to look at them, look at their back catalogue, maybe look at how they're doing things. And the other thing about this is actually talking to other artists. We're so good at putting our heads down and not focusing on actually speaking to people, not focusing on networking. Again, with going back to relating this to business, for quite a while, once I'd started my business as a sculptor, I started going to these business networking meetings, and it is like chalk and cheese when you just put an artist in a room full of people with ties, suits and ties. But there was actually quite a good amount of contacts that I got through doing that have actually ended up, getting me some public works of art, because they've spoken to the right people. You don't know who your close network of people knows. So I can walk into a room with, you guys. I don't know that one of you doesn't know the managing director of the Wildlife Trust, who can get me work doing a sculpture trail somewhere. You don't know. So it's always important to really focus on that kind of thing. And I'm kind of digressing, kind of going off on a tangent, but it's all relevant to that analogy of reference when you're laying out a sketch and when you're doing a drawing or painting or anything. That reference is finding the people who you aspire to find and finding out how they do things. So it's not cheating, it's just common sense. So that's my sort of proportions bit. Just going to do a quick time check, make sure we're not running through this too quickly, but I have a feeling that we're going to end up with quite a lot of questions. So the next thing I'm going to start looking at is perspective. So when I look at doing something, okay, it's not really the same with sculpture unless you're doing something that's exaggerated with foreshortening and things like that. But when you're laying out a sketch, when you're doing a drawing, you have to understand depth of field and things like that. You have to understand that perspective. And when I started thinking about this in relation to how I market myself and how I run my art as a business, it came out as sort of, how do I handle the small stuff? And also, do I handle the small stuff too much and don't step back? Because I know what it's like when I'm carving something and I'm focused on it really close in, and then I step back and think, oh no, I'm going to have to recarve the whole thing and push the face back 2 inches, which has happened to me. I ended up spending, I think I spent 2 hours, this was going back quite a long time, I'd spent 2 hours carving this face on a fairy, and she was in a pose like this, and I was at a show, so there were people watching as well, so I was there carving this. I was really happy with it, and I stepped back and I realized that her head was turned this way, but her face was out here, and there was no way that I could push the back of the head forward. It would have looked like she had a broken neck. So I really had to kind of take stock and go, this is wrong. But it was priceless hearing the gasps as I cut the face off and started again. But it's really important to step back and see the bigger picture. So when I'm looking at that in a business sense, I can focus on what I'm doing and focus on producing the artwork, and then step back and go, yes, I've got all this artwork. It's worth thousands. But I've not done any marketing. I don't know who's going to buy it. And then you're running around trying to, catch up with all those hours you've spent on that, and not focusing on, oh, actually, if I do one painting, take some photos of it, maybe lend it to a local business to put in their shop or something like that with your name on, and try and get these relationships going with other people who can help you market your artwork. And it's little things like that can make a massive difference to sales and commissions down the line. So moving on, we've started to gain this bigger picture. We've started to gain this view of how we can lay out a business, how we can lay out how we market ourselves. And we're down to the details. So again, going back to that perspective thing of focusing on small things, not stepping back, not trying to look at it through somebody else's eyes, making the most of your time, which, as my wife will tell you, I'm not the best at in the slightest. Thanks, darling. So it's really important to make the most of your time. So when you are spending time on things, actually go, well, okay, I know that I can estimate that I've got 100 hours to finish this painting before I know it's good, or I might be a very quick worker. For me, I'm like, I knew I just carved a Highland cow and I knew I had 3 days to do it in. I hammered it, and my arms are paying the price of that a bit at the moment. I'm not as young as I once was, but it's knowing about that time management, to going, okay, well, actually, okay, I know I need to spend this much time in order to produce what I want to produce, but then do I take a break and go and focus on a bit of social media marketing for a bit? Then do I go, oh, actually, I'd better do my bookkeeping or whatever, and things like that. That's the kind of thinking that is really difficult as an artist, because we get so involved and we will just want to create. But there's ways around these things, and as time goes on, and a bit later on, I'll be talking a bit more about that in detail as well. So how detailed does it need to be? Quite often, I've produced sculptures and looked back and thought, I liked it half a day ago. It's too refined. and depending on your style and things like that, sometimes we can be too detailed in our thinking. We can be too much focused on the finish, for instance. And there's some very finely finished things in here which need it. But some of these things, a piece like this here doesn't need to be sanded to 400 grit and shine to work as a piece. You don't always need to get rid of your pencil lines on a painting, because sometimes they add something to it, and they add, a sense of the working of it. Sometimes you don't need to over refine things to make them work. And a business can be as simple as, well, I know my stuff is selling on Facebook Marketplace and it's going well, so I'll keep doing it. And it's that sense of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try and make a multi-million-pound business out of doing something if it doesn't want to go there. And sometimes you have to try and kind of take stock and go, well, no, I can't turn around 40 paintings in a day to make this work. That's not going to happen. It's not trying to be something you're not, and it's not trying to be something you're not comfortable with. That is very important as well. So that's how detailed does it need to be. I've put, is it a signature or a brand here? And I think the two kind of go together sometimes. It's one of these details, going back to when I was talking about subject matter. you're selling yourself when you sell your artwork. You're selling a part of yourself. It's something creative that has come from what you feel, what you want to do. It might be as simple as you are finding a system. System's not the right word. You might find something that sells well. Let's take this back to chainsaw carving. As a chainsaw carver, I have friends who are very, very good at carving the same thing over and over again, and it sells. And they're happy with that. And I'm not going to turn around to them and say, oh, you need to look at adjusting it, try a different pose, try this, try that. I'm not going to try and make them something that they don't want to be. And as much as you are looking at going, well, this is the kind of artwork I do, and it all looks very similar, but people like it and they're buying it. So that's not what I'm not interested in saying this is the wrong way to do it. What I'm interested in saying is how can you make it more effective, and how can you do it so that you make a living? So the whole point of me looking into this is wanting to what's the word? I'm losing words now. Wanting to provide for my family, wanting to provide for my mortgage / rent, whatever it is that you need to provide for. If you find a way of doing that you enjoy, and it might just be reproducing something over and over again that works, I'm not saying to not do that. But with me, that's never going to work personally, because I can't do the same thing more than once without getting bored. I've got a really short attention span. So I have to do something new every time. I have to create something different. So with me and the way my business has worked, it's been very different from the way other people's have. But this is what I'm saying. It's very important to find what you're comfortable with. So we're selling ourselves. We're selling what we make to people. And it's really important to get a feel for how branding works within business. So let's kind of zoom out and take a look at, common advertising. You take the Coca-Cola branding or the Pepsi branding, you know it the instant you see a small square of that brand, don't you? It's ingrained in your head because you've seen it so many times. All you need to see is the top of a golden arch and you know that's McDonald's. So the way branding works in the business world is almost the same way a signature and a name works in the art world. Everybody knows the name Damien Hirst. Everybody knows the name Anthony Gormley. And that branding, if you like, I'm saying this might not be where you want to go to, but the name does become synonymous with something of quality, or something that sells well, or something you aspire to. So, but I mean, I'm going to take this. I've worked for. I've been carving wood for 20 years. Been making a living for almost 16 years now. Doing something that I love doing. I'm not going to pretend it's all roses. There's been times when we've been very close to not paying the mortgage, bottom of the overdraft. Where's the next piece of work going to come from? I'll drop my price for this one just to get the job so I can get some pennies in. And I've been there and I've done that. It's not been anything other than a roller coaster, but it's been an enjoyable roller coaster most of the time. It's those points where people say, oh, I heard your name mentioned here, and I heard your name mentioned there, and I heard your name mentioned there, so I'd really like to use you. That it makes you think, oh, you know what, it makes it worth it because you feel valued. And one of the things that about artists is we love it when we feel valued. We love it when somebody says, love that piece, really like that. Just, you know, that really does it for me. And to hear somebody say that, you know how good it is. You've had people say that to you before. You know how good that feels. So to take that to a level of creating a brand, you become synonymous with that style of artwork. Everybody knows, I'm taking Quentin Blake. You can tell a Quentin Blake illustration from a mile off. So simple. Even though he actually sketches it out beforehand before he inks it, and you know it's not just scrawled off the top of his head, but it isn't. But he's actually put some thought into that. But you know the brand without seeing the name Quentin Blake at the bottom because he's become such a synonymous person with that style. And everybody has their own style, but when you start to look at your style, it's how you attach your name to that in people's heads when we talk about branding, and it's how you associate yourself so much with that style that people go, is that a Simon O'Rourke, or is that a Dan Cordell, or is that a, do you know what I mean? So one of the things that I really want to emphasize is you have your own style, and you have that thing that somebody somewhere in the world will go, that does it for me. That is my thing. I'm buying that. And it doesn't matter how many knockbacks you get. There will always be somebody out there. There's 7 billion people in the world. there's a very small percentage of people who can afford our artwork, but within that small percentage of people who can afford our artwork, we know that there is somebody out there who will like what you do. I can guarantee it. So that kind of concludes that making of. And the bit you get to is where we have to sell ourselves. So where do we fit within that world? And this is the difficult. Where's the gallery? Where's where we, where we sell ourselves? How do we put ourselves out there? There are so many avenues these days with the advent of the internet where we can put our artwork online, and they all want to make money. At the end of the day, Instagram wants to make money, Facebook wants to make money, Twitter wants to make money. Everybody who puts a platform out there for you to use to promote your artwork wants something back. And it's how to give it back to them without losing part of yourself that is sometimes very, very difficult, because we have to conform to the algorithms and things like that. I'm not going to go into social media too much because we've actually got, after this, we want to do a dedicated art in social media seminar. So we're going to start to compile that after this one. We're going to actually get something together. We've got a few of the guys who know a lot about it. Mike Jones and James Elliott have done an awful lot of research on this. And we're going to do something, and they might be hearing this for the first time and go, are we? But we really want to do this because it's so important to actually have that information out there. And so I'm not going to go into that tonight because it's actually a minefield that I don't know a huge amount about. So self-promotion or self-depreciation. We all know what it's like to go, nobody's buying my work, it's all rubbish. I'm going to wander off and go and eat worms. But it's so difficult to promote yourself. And one of the things I wanted to say tonight, and actually I'll focus it after this, but it's not always about you promoting yourself, because sometimes we find it very difficult to blow our own trumpets. We find it very difficult. I find it difficult to walk up to someone and say, "Hi, I'm Simon. I'm really good at sculpture." It sounds rubbish. It sounds awful. It just makes me sound like a knob. So I'm not gonna kind of do that. That's not me. So I'll go into that a little bit later on. But you'll find people talking to you about exposure. Love this, exposure dollars. It's a dodgy currency. It's probably even worse than Bitcoin. It's that, do this for me. You'll get great exposure. Do it for free. Go on. And what they're really saying to you is, I don't want to pay for a real artist. I just want somebody to do something for me for free. And that exposure, is it really good exposure? Is it going to actually get you anywhere? There are occasions where it does, and I will talk about that in a minute. There's a few things that I want to highlight there, which actually are ways of doing that without losing out. But a lot of the time, it's a real horrible area to be in, because you then feel like, oh no, maybe this is good for me. Maybe this is, but it's very important to, again, going back to the perspective thing, take back a step and look at it as a bigger picture and go, is this really important right now that they have my artwork for free in order for me to get good exposure? And quite often it's not. So be really careful about that. I will talk about good exposure in a minute, but that is a real thing that a lot of people face when you're looking at trying to make a business as an artist. So this last one for me is probably what my entire business has hung off of over the last 15 years. Who speaks for you? So who speaks for you, for me, is to relate that to marketing, the business world, promoting yourself as an artist. Who likes your work, who is going to go and tell 10 other people that they love your work and they think it's collectible? Who is going to say, you should go and see this, or you should buy this because they are brilliant? Who are those people that do your promoting for you? Who are the people that are the best at saying, oh, you should see this guy's work? Find those people and get them to help you. So this, as a business sense, comes right back to when I was talking about the what do we focus on as artists and how do we work. Right now, I have somebody that I pay to do my social media for me. So I've got to a point where I can afford that. I couldn't afford it, in the beginning, but I've got to a point where I can afford that. And that little thing there is helping me to focus more on my artwork. As soon as I could, I got an accountant to be able to do my bookkeeping, to be able to sort out the money bits, to be able to help me with tax returns. The last thing I want to be doing in January is trying to work out what a tax return is before I even open the page and start to try and fill the numbers in and go, oh no, I'm going to scrabble around that big bin bag full of receipts and try and filter through them. What did I buy? It's impossible to really focus on what you're doing without that external help with the things that you're not good at. So for me, as soon as I could, I got an accountant. As soon as I could, I got some help with the business. It got to the point with my organization side of things, and I said before, I'm not good at organizing. I'm not brilliant at managing my time and things like that. So in 2008, my wife Liz actually was able to quit her job and come and work for me. And we had a very difficult time to start with. I was trying to, make sure the money was coming in for the mortgage, but I found up to that point, I was double booking and triple booking myself. I hadn't really managed my bank account properly, and I hadn't put aside the money for the tax, and ended up with a huge tax bill that I had to borrow money to pay. And there was all sorts of things that started happening, which just made me think, I can't do this. And I could have just said, I'm going to go get a job. And I could have done that at that time. But what spurred me on was those external things from those people you try and keep close to you who are saying, go for it, you could do it. There are those people around you who are saying, that's good. Keep in touch with those people, talk to those people, because they will lift you up at that point when you're feeling the worst. And I've had all sorts of ups and downs over the years. A couple of 2021 it was, January, I got to the point where I just could not cope. I had a complete meltdown. I really struggled to even focus. I walked into the workshop and I was like a zombie. I couldn't even really do anything at all. I'd got to the point, there were a lot of, external things happening that led towards it, but I got to the point where I had to go on antidepressants, and I didn't work for 2 months or whatever it was. I can't remember now, but that was the worst point I'd got to. But I'd let things build up, and I hadn't talked to people, and I hadn't gone and seen my mates, hadn't spent time with them. I'd locked myself away like we're all so good at doing, and it's dead easy to do that, but it's so important to just talk to people and keep communicating with people. And as I say, all those people who turn around to you and go, oh, that's amazing, that can make all the difference sometimes. So just keep those people on your radar and make sure that that sometimes you need their help, even if it's, you might not be in a pit of depression, but it might be at the point where you're like, I know you like what I do. What do you think about this? Should I go and do this exhibition? Should I fork out for this bit of equipment? Do you think it's worth it? And they'll give you decent input because they love you and they know what you can produce and the kind of things you can do. So really important to keep those people around you. So we're doing pretty well with getting through this very, very quickly. But actually, I'm this first half, if you like, in summary, creating artwork, you can see very much like creating yourself that business and that finding your way through the market of people who want to buy your artwork. So I'm going to run back. Let's quickly self-promotion. So again, that who speaks for you, self-promotion. Like I said before, we find it very difficult to go and say, I'm brilliant at this, which is why we need those people around us to do that for us. And briefly jumping into the social media side of things, highlighting those comments that say, oh, this is brilliant, love it, all of that kind of thing. I knew somebody who actually promoted himself by promoting those good comments. So do a screen capture of your artwork at the top with 2 or 3 really nice comments underneath it is a massive boost, because it's not you saying it, it's somebody else saying it. So when I was saying just then about, you know, your close friends and those people who you know can help you, and the people who can help you with the organization, perhaps, all of that kind of thing, that's great. But actually, a complete stranger saying, I love your artwork, is a very powerful thing. And you'll see it on big brands out there that have a really nice comment from somebody. That they'll have the brand, the bed, and then they'll have some celebrity who said most comfortable night ever, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it's that same thing. What the general public say. That's why reviews are so important for businesses like Amazon and eBay. Reviews are a massively important thing for those companies, because that's what sells. Because, you know, I go on to Amazon, or I hate Amazon, but you go on to Amazon or eBay, you don't buy something that's got a 1-star review. You buy things that have got 4 stars and upwards. You don't even look at the ones that have got a 1-star review. Sometimes it's just somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but you're led away from those automatically. So it's a really powerful thing to have a comment from a complete stranger, somebody who's not your mum. I was following a van once, and it said, voted #1 in big letters, and then by my mum underneath it. I thought it was brilliant. But it's that you know, that's a silly thing, but actually that made me remember it. And sometimes it's those things that actually kind of lead you to it. But having something, as I say, you know, a nice quote by a complete stranger is a really powerful thing. So really bear that in mind. So I think we are at the point, we're going to have a little comfort break for 10 minutes while I get some water. My throat is getting really, really sore now and a bit harsh. So I'm going to have a quick look at some of the comments online and try and answer a couple of these things, but it's going to be almost impossible to answer all of them. But yeah, so thank you very much for listening to the first bit, and we'll get back into it in 10 minutes' time. No, alcohol is good at the moment. I'm dry as a bone.
Yeah. Well, you've got your water there. I would take it at the corner before you place water for you. And I saw you had some, and so I walked away again. You're all right.
I'm just going to put this on mute, actually.
Oh, is it still playing?
Oh, some great questions. Yeah, sorry, I did turn the sound off. Oh, great question there. Brilliant. Let me note that one down. I'm going to answer some of these in the second half. Yeah, sponsorship. That's brilliant. Okay. We're going to end up with another 2 hours at this rate. Okie doke. Awesome. There's some very specific questions here. How do I get funding? That isn't fully my bag, but I will mention some of those. Colin, that's a great question. Okay, there's some very specific carving questions here, and I think some of those are probably for a different seminar at some point. I may do a carving specific seminar at some point. Okay, I think some of these questions are raising another seminar, so I'm going to do a carving specific one, I think. There's so many questions, I'm not going to get through all of these in one night, but thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Keep the questions coming. I'm going to make a note of all these and find ways to answer them for you. Great questions. I think we're going to start again. So just wait for people to sit down. We've had another 2 hours worth of questions that have come in so far. So we're in for the night. So I'm going to kind of kick off by saying there's some great questions come in, and obviously you guys will probably have some more questions for me. So we will probably move into some of those. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that have just come up during the break. So brand names and your name, and where do we go with that, and how do we label ourselves? So labeling yourself is quite what's the word? It's quite a clinical thing to do in a way. Thanks, darling. So you mentioned during the break, Twisted Timber, was it? So is is it good to find a name for your business, or is it better to promote your own name with it? I was unsure about this, and I actually went through this very question myself. I asked an awful lot of people. I got to the point where I was going to turn the business into Tree Carving Limited, which is very, very generic, isn't it? And it's and I was my thinking behind that was, oh, maybe I can build it up to something that I can just sell that brand on to somebody else and all the rest of it. And I'd taken myself too far away from the personal side of it. I'd taken myself too far away from me as a person and my artwork. I'd tried to box myself into the business world. I'd tried to box myself into this world where everybody catalogues something. So in relation to your question, your name is very, very powerful. Some people have these amazing sounding names, and I thought that to begin with, but then actually it's only because I'm so used to my own name, I didn't think it sounded very special. So, and you find this and you're so used to your own name, but actually with things that have been said to me in the past, and actually looking at other people. So rather than, for instance, you calling your business Twisted Timber, try Twisted Timber by so-and-so, or Twisted Timber from the studio of. Just those little changes add an awful lot of weight, because you are saying that this is the product, if you like, this is the artwork, but this is from the studio of somebody. Somebody is putting something into this from themselves. And at the end of the day, apart from when you're looking at something that is purely a consumable item, like Pepsi, like McDonald's, like Burger King, whatever, all of those things they don't need a name behind them, because we're not going, this is artisan food. That's McDonald's from the studio of. And it's like, okay, McDonald's is the guy's name when you think about it, but it's become not a name, hasn't it? It doesn't sound like a name anymore. But actually, when you add your full name, your first name, whatever it is, that adds a personal side to what you're selling, and you are selling this creativity that's coming from yourself, and it's really important not to lose that. So that kind of helps in in that kind of a way. Where for me as an artist, I'm not trying to build a franchise. You can't really do that, can you? Unless you had something that somebody else you knew could reproduce in exactly the same way. But then they'd be a clone, they wouldn't be being themselves. So what I make lives with me, and to an extent will die with me. But what I can pass on will be other things, like inspiration, hopefully, like, I don't know, whatever, starting a foundation of sorts, trying to impart into other people. That's what you're passing on. You're passing those things on. You're not sort of trying to build a franchise. It doesn't often work like that with art. And so that leads me quite nicely on to one of the questions I had in the chat sort of during the break was about I've referred to myself as a chainsaw carver. I've referred to myself as a sculptor. I know that there's a little bit of a stigma attached to the term chainsaw carver. I don't really care. For me, in terms of the name chainsaw carver, it's just something that people kind of know of. I often refer to myself as a sculptor, because at the end of the day, I don't care what tools I'm using, as long as they do the job quickly. And chainsaws do the job very, very quickly. So essentially, for me, that's I'm happy to be referred to as a chainsaw carver. I don't really care what you call me as long as you like my artwork. So at the end of the day, that to me is a little bit of a label. And sometimes, though, other people have problems with that. I did actually hear about, there was an art prize in America that a friend of mine got nominated for. And he said it got to the point where he was shortlisted, and then they found out he made the things with a chainsaw, and he immediately got knocked off the list. And they had this thing of, it's not real artwork if you're using a chainsaw. And utter tosh. That is just like, it's ridiculous. Completely and utterly ridiculous. And when you hear it said like that, of course it's ridiculous. But there are still people out there, and we've had comments on some of the chainsaw carving forums. There's this one guy who keeps popping up going, "Yo, you're cheating using a chainsaw." I quite often say to people, I'm using chisels. There's just lots of chisels, and they're all attached to a chain. It's whatever you use. It was whatever cuts your wood, you know. Are you going to sit there with an abacus instead of a calculator? You know? Technology advances, and using it is brilliant, except for AI. Don't get me started on AI artwork. But thankfully, it's very difficult to do AI chainsaw carving. So that I hope that's kind of helpful for you in as much as, applying labels to yourself. But in a very real sense, there is a difference sometimes also that's applied to people when you are looking at this really grey area of, is it craft or is it art? Is a craft item an art item? Is Doris down the road doing cross stitch any less art than what we're doing here? And I'd argue it's not. It's visual communication. She might be following a pattern, and that's fine.